In the year 1325, on a swampy island in Lake Texcoco, a group of wandering tribes founded a city that should never have survived. They were the Mexica, semi-nomadic migrants from a mythical homeland called Aztlan, searching for divine destiny. According to prophecy, they would know their true home when they saw an eagle perched atop a cactus, devouring a serpent. That sign came on an island in the Valley of Mexico, a place where no one wanted to settle. The surrounding city-states saw the Mexica as barbarians, interlopers unfit for civilization. They were scorned by neighbors like Culhuacan and Azcapotzalco, forced into vassalage and often hunted like prey. Yet within a century, these outcasts forged an alliance so powerful it reshaped Mesoamerica. This is the story of how the Triple Alliance between Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan built an empire through war, strategy, and myth. The Mexica did not arrive in the Valley of Mexico as conquerors. They arrived as refugees. According to Codex Boturini, the Mexica wandered for decades before settling in the lake region. Their early years were marked by hardship, hunger, disease, and constant pressure from rival polities. At first, they tried assimilation. They sought alliances, even offering tribute to Culhuacan, one of the dominant powers of the time. But a disastrous misunderstanding changed everything. The Culhuacan king agreed to a marriage alliance, sending his daughter to wed a Mexica leader. But after the ceremony, the Mexica sacrificed her and returned her flayed skin to the horrified court. This act branded them as savages and made enemies of nearly every major power in the valley. For decades, the Mexica survived as mercenaries and vassals under the Tepanec Confederation, led by Azcapotzalco. They fought in foreign wars, paid heavy tributes, and endured near-constant raids. But in 1426, the balance of power shifted. The death of the long-reigning Tepanec ruler, Tezozomoc, sparked a succession crisis. His sons turned against each other, fracturing the once unified confederation. Sensing opportunity, the Mexica allied with two disaffected city-states, Texcoco and Tlacopan. Thus was born the Triple Alliance, a coalition forged in chaos, bound by mutual interest, and destined to reshape Mesoamerica. The Triple Alliance was not a democracy. It was a power-sharing agreement, with Tenochtitlan emerging as the dominant force. At its helm stood Itzcoatl, the fourth emperor of the Mexica, and his brilliant advisor, Tlacaelel, often described as the brains behind the empire. Together, they transformed the alliance from a defensive pact into a conquest machine. Tlacaelel was no warrior. He was a strategist, priest, and propagandist. He understood that empires are not built on swords alone. They are built on myth, fear, and loyalty. He rewrote history. He erased records of earlier defeats. He elevated Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, to supreme status. He declared that the Mexica were chosen by the gods to rule, and that their conquests were not acts of aggression, but divine duty. This ideological shift galvanized the population. Warfare became sacred. Victory meant divine favor. Defeat meant cosmic failure. Under Tlacaelel's guidance, the Mexica restructured their military. They created elite warrior orders, the Eagle and Jaguar warriors, drawn from commoners who earned rank through battlefield prowess. They trained relentlessly. They developed new tactics, including ambushes, siege warfare, and psychological intimidation. Most importantly, they used terror as a weapon. When a city resisted, the Mexica made examples of it, Survivors were enslaved. Leaders were sacrificed. Temples were defaced. The message was clear: submit or perish. The first great test of the Triple Alliance came in 1428, when Itzcoatl and Nezahualcóyotl of Texcoco joined forces to defeat Azcapotzalco. The battle was brutal. After months of siege and skirmishes, the allies breached the city walls. The Teponic king, Maxtla, was captured and executed. His head was displayed in the plaza of Tenochtitlan. With Azcapotzalco destroyed, the Triple Alliance seized control of western Lake Texcoco and began expanding rapidly. By the mid-15th century, the Mexica had turned their gaze westward toward the Toluca Valley, a fertile region rich in cotton and precious obsidian. The campaign was led by Moctezuma Ilhuicamina, who employed a mix of diplomacy, deception, and overwhelming force. Some cities submitted willingly, offered tributes, and were spared. Others resisted and were utterly destroyed. One such city was Zacatotlan, whose leaders refused to surrender. When the Mexica finally took the city, they razed it completely, leaving behind only ruins and silence. This victory secured a critical corridor for trade and military movement, cementing the empire's dominance. Not all battles were about conquest. Some were about control. The Flower Wars, ritualized conflicts between the Mexica and rival states like Tlaxcala, served multiple purposes: to capture prisoners for sacrifice, to train young warriors, and perhaps most importantly, to keep potential enemies occupied and divided. These wars drained resources and morale without full-scale invasion, a masterstroke of imperial strategy. Itzcoatl reigned from 1427 to 1440, the founder of empire. Itzcoatl was the fourth emperor of the Mexica and the man who set the empire in motion. Under his leadership, the Triple Alliance was formed and the foundations of imperial ideology were laid. His reign marked the beginning of Tenochtitlan's transformation from vassal to ruler. Tlacaelel, 1398 to 1487, the architect of power. As both general and high priest, Tlacaelel wielded immense influence. He reshaped Aztec religion, rewrote history, and justified conquest through divine mandate. Without him, the Aztec Empire might never have existed. Nezahualcóyotl of Texcoco reigned from 1431 to 1472, the philosopher king. Though Texcoco played second fiddle to Tenochtitlan in the Triple Alliance, Nezahualcóyotl was a towering figure in Mesoamerican history. Poet, philosopher, and reformer, he modernized Texcoco's legal system, rebuilt the city after its destruction by the Teponics, and contributed significantly to the cultural and intellectual life of the empire. Moctezuma Ilhuicamina reigned from 1440 to 1469, the expansionist emperor. Also known as Moctezuma I, this emperor expanded the empire's reach far beyond the Valley of Mexico. He standardized tribute collection, built massive temples, and established a bureaucratic system that allowed the empire to govern distant provinces effectively. Building an empire through war brought immense rewards, but also immense costs. Tribute system. The fall of Tenochtitlan in 1521 marked the end of the Aztec Empire, but not the end of its legacy. Today, Nahuatl is still spoken by over 1 million people. Mexican culture continues to reflect Aztec traditions in art, cuisine, and language. The eagle devouring a serpent, the symbol of the Aztec founding myth, appears on the national flag of Mexico. And yet, the Triple Alliance remains one of history's most fascinating experiments in state-building through war. It teaches us that empires rise not just through strength, but through strategy. Ideology can be as powerful as the sword. Conquest brings glory, but also instability. And sometimes, the most dangerous enemy is not outside your gates, but inside your own alliances. Part 2. Expansion, Governance, and Administration. With the fall of Azcapotzalco in 1428, the Triple Alliance was no longer just a defensive pact. It had become an engine of conquest. But building an empire is one thing. Governing it is another entirely. The Mexica, once outsiders to the sophisticated political landscape of the Valley of Mexico, now faced the daunting task of administering vast territories, managing complex tribute systems, and maintaining control over often hostile populations. To do this, they developed a highly organized imperial structure combining military might with bureaucratic efficiency, religious ideology, and strategic diplomacy. At its height, the Aztec Empire stretched from the Pacific coast to the Gulf of Mexico, encompassing diverse ethnic groups, languages, and cultures. It ruled over more than 5 million people across 38 provinces, each required to send regular tribute to Tenochtitlan. To manage this sprawling domain, the Mexica created a centralized administration that blended local governance with imperial oversight. At the top of the hierarchy stood the Hueytlatlani, or the Great Speaker, the Emperor of Tenochtitlan. Unlike European monarchs, the emperor did not rule by divine right alone. He was seen as a mediator between the gods and the people, responsible for ensuring cosmic balance through warfare, ritual, and justice. The emperor was advised by a council of nobles, military commanders, and high priests. These advisors helped make decisions on war, tribute, and internal affairs. However, the final authority rested with the emperor. To enforce imperial policy, the Mexica appointed tribute collectors known as calpixque, who traveled annually to conquered regions to assess and collect goods. These officials wielded immense power and often abused it. Local rulers were allowed to remain in place, provided they remained loyal and paid their dues. This system minimized resistance while ensuring a steady flow of resources into the capital. In some cases, rebellious cities were replaced with puppet rulers loyal to Tenochtitlan. In others, entire populations were relocated to dilute opposition. Despite lacking a formal alphabet, the Mexica maintained detailed records using pictographic codices, illustrated manuscripts that documented tribute, military campaigns, and religious events. Scribes, known as tlaquilos, were trained in elite schools called palmecac and played a crucial role in documenting the empire's growth and wealth. These codices listed everything from the number of cotton blankets owed by a province to the number of warriors conscripted for military service. The Aztec legal system was strict, hierarchical, and deeply intertwined with religious doctrine. Crime was not only a violation of law, but also a disruption of cosmic order. Laws applied differently depending on social class, but punishments were severe across the board. Crimes such as murder, theft, adultery, and drunkenness among minors were punishable by death. Nobles who committed crimes faced harsher penalties than commoners, under the belief that they should know better. Other offenses led to slavery, exile, or public humiliation. Even minor infractions like failing to pay tribute could result in land confiscation or forced labor. Courts existed at multiple levels: local, provincial, and imperial, and judges were expected to be impartial and well-versed in legal traditions. Justice was seen as a way to maintain harmony with the gods. Crimes against religion, like desecrating temples or impersonating a priest, were considered especially grave. Human sacrifice was not only a religious act, but also a form of state-sponsored punishment. Captured enemies and condemned criminals were offered to the gods to ensure continued prosperity. This blurred the lines between law, religion, and politics, reinforcing the idea that obedience to the state was equivalent to devotion to the divine. As the empire expanded, so too did Tenochtitlan, transforming from a marshy settlement into one of the most advanced cities of the pre-Columbian world. By the early 16th century, the city covered over 13 square kilometers, with a population estimated at between 200,000 and 400,000, rivaling contemporary European capitals like Rome and Paris. Built on an island in Lake Texcoco, Tenochtitlan was prone to flooding. To combat this, the Mexica constructed canals for transportation, dikes to regulate water levels, causeways connecting the city to the mainland, aqueducts bringing fresh water from springs on the mainland. These innovations made Tenochtitlan not only habitable, but also highly efficient, allowing goods, soldiers, and messages to move swiftly across the city. At the heart of the city stood the Templo Mayor, a towering double pyramid dedicated to Tlaloc, the rain god, and Huitzilopochtli, the god of war. Surrounding it were palaces, ball courts, marketplaces, and administrative buildings, all laid out in a grid-like pattern that reflected cosmic order. The city was divided into 4 main districts, each governed by its own council and responsible for specific civic duties. Life in the capital was surprisingly structured. Markets operated daily, offering everything from food and textiles to luxury goods like jade and feathers. Education was universal. Boys attended either telpuchcalli, schools for commoners, or calmicac, elite academies. Girls were taught domestic skills, though some received training in crafts and medicine. Public health was taken seriously. Baths and sanitation were part of daily life, and waste was collected regularly. The success of the Triple Alliance depended not only on military conquest, but also on economic dominance. The Aztec economy was based on a complex tribute system, trade networks, and a barter-based marketplace, where cacao beans and cotton cloaks served as currency. Every year, subject provinces sent massive quantities of goods to Tenochtitlan. Tribute included foodstuffs, maize, cacao, chili, luxury items like jade, turquoise, and gold, textiles and dyed feathers, and human captives for sacrifice. Failure to meet tribute quotas resulted in punitive expeditions, where Mexica armies would march into disobedient provinces and restore compliance, often violently. This system enriched the capital and funded monumental construction projects, religious ceremonies, and military campaigns. While tribute ensured the empire's survival, long-distance trade brought in exotic goods and strengthened diplomatic ties. Professional merchants known as pochteca acted as spies, diplomats, and traders. They traveled far beyond the empire's borders, reaching as far as Central America and the American Southwest. Pochteca carried goods like obsidian blades, turquoise, and rare bird feathers, exchanging them for gold, exotic animals, and new technologies. Their reports also served as intelligence for future military campaigns, giving the Mexica insight into potential weaknesses in neighboring states. The Aztecs understood that empires are not held together by force alone. They must also be culturally unified. Thus, education, religion, and artistic expression became tools of imperial cohesion. Education was mandatory for all children, though access varied by class. Commoners attended telpuchcalli, where they learned basic literacy, military drills, and moral instruction. Nobles studied in calmicac, receiving advanced training in philosophy, astronomy, history, and leadership. Unlike many ancient civilizations, the Aztec system allowed for limited social mobility. Skilled warriors and scholars could rise above their birth status. Nahuatl, the language of the Mexica, became the lingua franca of the empire. While many subject peoples retained their native tongues, Nahuatl was used in official documents, religious rituals, and court proceedings. This linguistic dominance reinforced a sense of shared identity, even among culturally distinct groups. Aztec art was rich in symbolism, often depicting gods, mythological scenes, and historical events. Murals, sculptures, and codices told stories of conquest, cosmology, and divine prophecy. Music and dance were central to both religious worship and public festivals. Drums, flutes, and rattles filled the air during grand ceremonies at the Great Temple. Poetry flourished under figures like Itzcoatl of Texcoco, whose philosophical verses explored themes of impermanence, fate, and divine justice. Though the Triple Alliance is remembered for its military prowess, diplomacy played a critical role in its expansion and stability. The Mexica understood that not every province needed to be conquered. Some could be persuaded to join voluntarily. The Aztecs often integrated foreign deities into their pantheon, making conquered peoples feel that their gods were honored in Tenochtitlan. This syncretism eased tensions and encouraged loyalty. They also adopted architectural styles, artistic motifs, and administrative practices from other Mesoamerican cultures, creating a hybrid imperial identity. Like many ancient empires, the Mexica used marriage to cement alliances. Noble families from conquered regions were invited to intermarry with the ruling class of Tenochtitlan. These unions created political bonds and diluted resistance by tying local elites to the imperial family. Although the Mexica preferred to project strength, they sometimes pursued peaceful integration. Some cities, particularly those with strong defenses or strategic locations, were given incentives to submit without bloodshed. These included tax breaks, protection from rivals, and elevated status within the empire. This strategy allowed the Triple Alliance to expand without constant warfare, though it also created a fragile network of loyalties that would later prove disastrous when the Spanish arrived. Despite the Mexica's efforts at integration, resistance simmered beneath the surface. Many provinces resented heavy tribute demands, religious impositions, and the ever-present threat of military intervention. Some regions attempted outright rebellion. One of the few major powers that successfully resisted Aztec domination was the Tarascan Empire, centered in modern-day Michoacán. The Tarascans had superior metalworking technology and fielded large armies equipped with copper-tipped weapons, something the Mexica lacked. Several campaigns were launched against them, but none succeeded. The Aztecs eventually accepted the border and focused on consolidating their existing holdings. Rebellions erupted in various parts of the empire, particularly in the Oaxaca Valley and along the Gulf Coast. When rebellions occurred, the Mexica responded with brutal efficiency, sending armies to crush dissent and reassert control. But these repeated interventions drained resources and exposed the empire's vulnerability to coordinated resistance. Perhaps the most famous example of resistance was Tlaxcala, a powerful confederation that never submitted to Aztec rule. Despite centuries of conflict, the Tlaxcalans managed to retain their independence, largely due to their strategic location, decentralized government, and fierce warrior culture. When the Spanish arrived in 1519, it was Tlaxcala that became their first major ally, a decision that would change the course of history. Chapter 17. The Fall of the Triple Alliance, Cracks in the Empire. For over a century, the Triple Alliance ruled Mesoamerica with unmatched military might and imperial efficiency. But beneath its grandeur, cracks had begun to form, and when the Spanish arrived in 1519, those fractures turned into an earthquake. The fall of the Aztec Empire was not a simple matter of conquest. It was the result of internal divisions, external alliances, ideological shifts, and the sheer unpredictability of human conflict. And at the heart of it all was Tenochtitlan's greatest weakness. The very system that had made it powerful also made it vulnerable. In April 1519, a fleet of 9 ships landed on the shores of Veracruz. On board were around 500 Spanish soldiers, led by Hernán Cortés, a man driven by ambition, faith, and a hunger for gold. At first, the Mexica did not see them as a serious threat. Reports reached Moctezuma II, the emperor of Tenochtitlan, that strange men had arrived, bearded, clad in metal armor, riding animals unknown to the Americas. But Moctezuma hesitated. Some say he believed Cortés was the return of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god prophesied to come from the east. Others argue he was simply cautious, unsure how to respond to these foreign intruders. But whatever his reasoning, his delay proved fatal. Cortés quickly forged alliances with disaffected groups like the Totonacs, who resented Aztec rule. He then marched inland, seeking an audience with the emperor himself. When he finally reached Tenochtitlan in November 1519, he was welcomed, not as a conqueror, but as a guest. That would soon change. Cortés knew that conquering Tenochtitlan would require more than just his small army, so he played a dangerous game, one of diplomacy, deception, and violence. He took Moctezuma hostage, claiming protection while effectively holding the emperor prisoner within his own palace. For months, the city remained tense but stable. Then came the massacre at Templo Mayor. While Cortés was away dealing with a rival Spanish force sent from Cuba, his lieutenant, Pedro de Alvarado, ordered the slaughter of hundreds of Aztec nobles during the sacred festival. The resulting bloodshed shattered any remaining trust between the invaders and their hosts. The people of Tenochtitlan rose in fury. Cortés returned to find his position untenable. In what became known as the Noche Triste, sad night, the Spanish tried to flee under cover of darkness, only to be ambushed at a causeway crossing. Hundreds of Spaniards and thousands of indigenous allies died that night. Yet Cortés survived, and he learned a crucial lesson. The empire was not unified. Many hated the Mexica and could be convinced to fight against them. After retreating and regrouping, Cortés launched a new campaign, this time with a coalition of tens of thousands of native warriors, including the Tlaxcalans, Texcocans, and other former vassals of the Mexica. They marched back toward Tenochtitlan in May 1521, beginning an 80-day siege that would bring the once mighty capital to its knees. The Spaniards brought horses, steel weapons, and gunpowder, but it was the support of local allies that truly broke the empire. The Mexica fought bravely under Cuauhtémoc, the last emperor, but they were outnumbered, outgunned, and starving. Disease spread rapidly, particularly smallpox, which devastated the population. Without immunity, entire neighborhoods were wiped out. By August 13, 1521, Tenochtitlan was reduced to ruins and ash. The Triple Alliance, the foundation of Aztec power, was gone. With the fall of Tenochtitlan, the Aztec Empire collapsed, but the Triple Alliance's legacy did not vanish overnight. The institutions built over a century of war and governance endured in fragments, sometimes reshaped, sometimes erased. The Spanish sought to erase Aztec culture entirely. Temples were torn down, idols destroyed, and priests executed or forced into conversion. The great temple of Tenochtitlan was buried beneath a new cathedral, a symbolic victory over paganism. Yet, many elements of Aztec life persisted underground, in language, folklore, and traditions passed through generations. The alliance structure of the Triple Alliance was dismantled. Texcoco and Tlacopan faded into obscurity, while Tenochtitlan was rebuilt as Mexico City, the capital of New Spain.
The tribute system was replaced with the encomienda, a brutal labor system that forced indigenous populations to work for Spanish landlords. Resistance continued in various forms: rebellions, secret rituals, and even legal appeals to the Spanish crown. But the days of independent rule were over. Despite the devastation, the descendants of the Mexica and their allies lived on. Nahuatl remained spoken in many regions. Indigenous identity persisted, often hidden behind Catholic saints and colonial customs. Modern Mexicans still carry genetic traces of the Aztecs, and the symbols of the empire, most notably the eagle, serpent, and cactus, remain central to national identity. The story of the Triple Alliance is not just about conquest, it is about strategy, ideology, and survival. It shows us how a group of outcasts transformed themselves into rulers of a vast empire through alliance, propaganda, and warfare. It reminds us that empires are not built by divine favor alone, but by leaders who understand the art of power. And it warns us that no matter how mighty an empire becomes, if it relies too heavily on conquest and coercion, its foundations will always be fragile. Because in the end, the Aztecs didn't fall because they weren't strong enough. They fell because they built everything on war, and forgot that even the strongest sword can break. Chapter 22. Lesser-known facts about the Triple Alliance's collapse. While most people know the broad strokes of the fall of the Aztec Empire, few are familiar with the lesser-known details that reveal just how fragile and complex the Triple Alliance really was. These facts challenge common myths and offer a deeper understanding of how an empire built on war ultimately fell, not just to Spanish swords, but to its own internal contradictions. Though often referred to as the Aztec Empire, the Triple Alliance was technically a coalition of three city-states: Tenochtitlan, Mexica; Texcoco, Acalhua; and Tlacopan, Tepanec. Of these, only Tenochtitlan gained true imperial dominance. Texcoco played an intellectual and cultural role, while Tlacopan remained largely subordinate. When Cortés arrived, Texcoco quickly switched sides, proving that the alliance was never as unified as it seemed. This lack of political cohesion made the empire vulnerable from within. Contrary to popular belief, Moctezuma II was not a cowardly emperor paralyzed by superstition. He was a shrewd ruler who had expanded the empire and strengthened its tribute system. But he faced an impossible dilemma. If he attacked the Spaniards, he risked alienating allies and triggering a rebellion. If he welcomed them, he might learn their secrets and control them. His hesitation was not weakness, it was calculated gambling in a high-stakes game. And when that gamble failed, there was no turning back. One of the most devastating factors in the fall of Tenochtitlan was not steel or strategy, but disease. In 1520, a single enslaved African man brought smallpox into the city. With no prior exposure, the indigenous population had no immunity. Estimates suggest that up to 40% of the population died during the outbreak, including key leaders, warriors, and laborers. Without manpower, food production collapsed, morale crumbled, and resistance weakened. It was not just war that destroyed the empire, it was biology. Cortés did not conquer the Aztecs alone. At the height of the siege of Tenochtitlan, he commanded around 900 Spaniards, but over 80,000 native allies, many of whom were former subjects of the empire. Tlaxcalans, Texcocans, and others saw the Spanish not as invaders, but as liberators from Aztec domination. This coalition was critical to victory. proving that the real battle was not between Europeans and indigenous peoples, but between indigenous factions using European weapons. After months of starvation, disease, and relentless fighting, the last emperor of the Mexica, Cuauhtémoc, finally surrendered in August 1521. He is famously depicted standing before Cortés, offering his dagger and saying, "Do with me as you will." Rather than executing him immediately, Cortés kept Cuauhtémoc alive, at least for a time. Years later, during a disastrous expedition to Honduras, Cortés accused Cuauhtémoc of plotting rebellion and had him hanged. His death marked the final end of the Triple Alliance and the birth of colonial rule in Mexico. Thanks to modern archaeology, our understanding of the Triple Alliance and the Aztec Empire continues to evolve. Recent discoveries have shed light on everything from military tactics to urban planning, revealing a civilization far more advanced and nuanced than once believed.
Excavations at the Templo Mayor in modern-day Mexico City have uncovered thousands of ritual artifacts, including human skulls used in ceremonies, jaguar pelts and obsidian blades, statues of gods like Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc. These findings confirm that religion was not just a belief system, it was a tool of imperial control, reinforcing loyalty through fear, sacrifice, and divine justification. In 2021, researchers discovered a hidden chamber beneath the Templo Mayor, possibly used for secret rituals or elite burials. The discovery suggests that the temple was not only a center of public worship, but also a place of mystery, secrecy, and elite power plays. It reinforces the idea that Aztec leadership was deeply intertwined with religious authority, and that losing control of the temples meant losing control of the empire.